Scott Brinker, really, really happy to have you on the show today. It's a pleasure to be speaking with you again, and I've always enjoyed our conversation. So, Scott, coming from the big world of HubSpot, looking after the partner ecosystem over there, and obviously people know Scott as well from coming from the Chief MarTech. That enormous diagram that you see of all of those different pieces of technology, marketing technology. How many is there this year or in 2021? How many pieces of tech?
Ooh, it's climbing. Let's say north of 10,000.
North of 10,000 pieces of technology. Anybody that's in tech will definitely recognize this landscape. It essentially looks like a map of the world, but in little logos of technologies is probably the best way to describe it. So, Scott, really thank you for coming on and having a chat with me here today.
Yeah, no, pleasure to be here with you again, Andy.
Perfect. Look, let's get right into it. So I want this to be as like quick fire as possible, and in order to make sure that you can get back to your day as well. We're looking at technology, like and your view on tech, right? Like you're right, getting your hands dirty, understanding the entire ecosystem. You said you recognize over 10,000 pieces of technology, right, in the overall ecosystem. Tell me, what are the core types of technology that you see marketers should be investing in 2022? Just the types of technology, that can help them most.
Yeah, well, I mean, it is a massive landscape out there, but it's interesting still for most marketers. There's like an 80-20 rule here where, it's actually a handful of core applications, that really deliver the most value across marketing organizations, right? And so this is whatever your, customer system of record is, like your CRM, whatever you're using for, like actual campaign management, like a marketing automation platform, certainly what you're using to actually run, the marketing organization. So any sort of, marketing resource management, things that get into, everything from like, the finance side of marketing to, the project management side of marketing, and so these are sort of the core applications where marketers spend a tremendous amount of their time. But then you have this just amazing long tail, of all these different specialist apps. Like, okay, if I'm, running a really groovy virtual event, what's the platform that I'm using for that? If I'm diving, deeper into, some sort of like marketing attribution and analytics, view of particular segments, I might be using more of a BI tool for that. So, I mean, I'm not even quite sure where you would begin, but I would say if you get those core applications right and you really get the most value out of them, then kind of everything else is like icing on the cake.
Yeah, that's a fair point. I think with the core applications, I see clearly like your marketing automation platform, which is your HubSpot, for example, where you're working currently. Also, from the MRM perspective, MRM, sure. But then I've always found that if you don't want to get overwhelmed by all of the different pieces of technology you can add on to that, I would look at it, okay, building that to the best that you possibly can. So in the example of HubSpot, stick with HubSpot, see how you get on, and then start to build partnering integrations or partnering technologies on top of that based on what they have in their store and based on the problems that you're trying to solve at any one particular time. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. And there is such an amazing array of specialist apps that are out there. I was just looking at another one the other day, around interactive content, of how you create like these interactive, assessment tools and, quizzes and calculators. I mean, these are really fun ways for, marketers to engage, digital communities. But yeah, those apps tend to be highly specialized apps. So use them where it fits.
This is the thing. It's always been a challenge for me trying to build it, because if you really want to have control over it, you need to be putting somebody on it, and you can get out of your depth very quickly and spend a huge amount of cash on many different apps that you're not really using. Have you come across that much when people are really open to new technology and getting new stuff on board and like, oh, we need the top tools and the top tech? They get their foundations built nicely with, for example, their marketing automation platform, and then they just start throwing loads of stuff on top of it, and it's all a little bit out of control. Do you come across that quite a bit?
A certain amount. I mean, one of the ways in which you have to sort of look at this is the number of people in the marketing organization who are using a particular app. So again, when you're talking about something like, your marketing automation platform, CRM, marketing resource management, right? These tend to be very universally adopted, across all the participants in the department. That's part of the cohesion that helps to bring. But, then when you start like looking at, different specializations within marketing, right? People might, for instance, like if I'm producing a podcast, I might have a small little stack of tools I'm using to optimize the recording, to be able to put together the distribution, on different networks, and probably most people in marketing never even see those tools or care about them, but if you're the podcast master, right, you probably have a continually evolving stack, in your toolbox that you're using. And so, I think a certain amount of that is fine as long as you distinguish between, what's helping a particular individual or team in a very specialized mission versus what is intended to be a more universal capability.
Interesting. Where do you see that control? Because that's really a control thing that I see there as well. Like there needs to be somebody that's probably managing that to make sure that all tech is talking to one another, for example, that there's also an overview of budget in terms of tech spend and so on. That role is probably not the CMO. The CMO probably has enough on their plate for her to be saying, oh, I'm going to go and dig into every single piece of technology that we're using. Who is that person that you're recognizing on marketing teams to keep that overview?
So typically that would be a marketing operations person who's kind of responsible for the MarTech stack. And they're probably at this point, if they've got a stack of any size, they're probably using a SaaS management platform. There's now a whole bunch of them out there. That's great. I mean, they basically plug in, they keep track of all the different subscriptions you have, who are the different users on the different things, and just make it very easy to aggregate, okay, who's doing what, and provide some governance layer, around what's happening with the MarTech stack.
Sure. Let's stick on that marketing operations role for just a second, because I see this become more and more prevalent, maybe over the past 5 or 6 years, marketing ops. It's still, in the US, for example, it's grown rapidly. I think in Europe, I don't know what your experience is with Europe and how you're seeing marketing ops progress, but are you seeing it grow as quickly in Europe as you would do in the US? You may not have the answers to that, but.
Yeah, I to be honest, I don't have hard data that comes to mind on that. I suspect it also varies considerably on what do we mean by marketing operations. True. Like the scope of the role, in some companies, it's like, oh, this is the person that does the reports every month, which is a very narrow, limited scope view of marketing operations. And then on the other end, you've got, folks that are really orchestrating, the whole automated processes of the department, the entire tech stack. And so, it's probably more of a function of, just what is the scope of a marketing operations person or team at different companies? Probably still pretty high variance for that.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, the marketing ops role, as I said, it's something that I've seen become quite prevalent, B2B and B2C, actually, both over the past maybe 5 or 6 years. And some of the organizations that I've worked at, we've had a marketing ops team that was mainly focused on making sure that budget was flowing correctly, making sure that all of the tool set that we had was speaking with one another, making sure that reports were run effectively and not by individual departments within marketing. Because when you get that, people might be cooking the books a little. Whereas our ops team almost acts like a third party to the marketing org. Would you agree with that?
I think that's one of the best ways. Like when we think about this idea of governance, which is a word that sounds like very heavy. Oh my goodness, governance, but actually, it's really straightforward. It's just about, largely about making sure we're standardizing, on the definitions of, what data we're using, what does this piece of data mean? So when we start to aggregate it in things like reports, or we're leveraging it across different campaigns or programs from different teams, that sort of everyone's like looking at the same objective reality there. And that sort of governance is, just super valuable.
Oh, for sure. And I think also from the overall exec team and the connection to the marketing department, that bit in between the marketing ops side of things is probably really important to make sure that the information flow to the rest of the the rest of the exec team that are looking at marketing results, which is typically something that people are very much focused on. That there's that bit in between that's saying, okay, look, they're sort of playing on both sides. What do you think of that? Would that be true?
Well, so again, I think what makes a great marketing ops team at this point in time isn't just the like standardization and the structure and governance they bring to marketing, but it's almost always, now getting alignment, across the other teams that marketing works with. So it's making sure that what we're talking about in marketing ops aligns with what we're talking about in sales ops and, customer service and success, that it matches up to the models that finance is holding the entire revenue organization accountable for. Again, marketing ops might not be responsible for all of those different pieces, but they want to make sure that it's aligned with those different pieces. So again, just when all this stuff rolls up to the business of how are we performing overall, in acquiring, delighting, retaining customers, that it's sort of one common source of truth.
That's super interesting. I mean, so then I'm keep on drilling into the marketing ops side of things, but like it's an interesting role, right? And if we're talking about tech, that's interesting to somebody in the marketing ops team. Clearly, okay, marketing resource management is something that's clearly of interest. Are there other areas to marketing ops professionals that they should be looking at to help them do their job better that you see?
Well, I think one of the most interesting areas, not just in marketing ops, but in ops roles in general, is this growing maturity of the data operations layer across a company. That increasingly it's not that, marketing has its data and sales has its data and product has a different set of data. It's ultimately all this data is now starting to coalesce down to a shared data warehouse, which then we're able to leverage, for organization-wide, analytics and business intelligence. And then increasingly using some fancy tools they call reverse ETL. If ETL was about loading things into the data warehouse, reverse ETL is about taking things we learn in the data warehouse and uploading them to our frontline operating, apps like marketing campaign systems or, CRMs or things like that, And so I think this is a really exciting time for marketing ops people because they are right at that intersection of helping to both define what data marketing can contribute, to the company-wide, data layer, but also how marketing can benefit, by pulling additional insights and data from other departments across the company too.
That's super interesting because when I first came to the tech space, one of the things that I recognized very quickly was that you have an abundance of data. The next thing I noticed was, what the heck do I do with all this data? Like, how do you interpret it? How do you turn it into something that you can actually use, right? It's like you have website visits, you have email opens, you have email clicks. You've got financial data coming from finance that's helping fuel budgets. You've got campaign data that's telling me about clicks and also page visits and also downloads. I've got all of this stuff, but what the heck do I do with it? So what you just said is technology that basically takes that, scrunches it up into something meaningful, and then hands it back to the ops team to be able to present that in digestible format to other members of the team, correct?
Yes. Yeah, it's kind of interesting. It's almost like you're adrift in the ocean, on a boat, and you're like, water, please, water. It's the right kind of water that you need.
That's an amazing analogy. And I've been in that boat way too often. But okay, so do you come across many organizations nowadays, like on the enterprise side, that haven't focused on that marketing operations or don't believe in marketing operations? Or is there a disjoint there at all?
I run across very few that don't buy into marketing operations at this point, but my sample is probably biased because if they don't buy into marketing operations, I'm not sure they ever intersect in my world anyway. Sure. But as we were chatting earlier, again, I think there is still a very wide variance in the maturity, of the marketing operations capability in companies. And part of this is just because, change takes time. It doesn't happen quickly. But also, yeah, there's, as is the case in many places, across the tech landscape right now, there's a real talent crunch, finding people who are experienced, great marketing operations leaders. It's just tough. There's only so many of them out there right now, and the demand far exceeds the supply. So I think that also just becomes another constraint on just how quickly companies are able to move.
Yeah, I think the past 2 years as well has accelerated people or companies in terms of what they do digitally as well. And that then brings in a need for more tracking. More tracking then turns into how do we do stuff with those meaningful or those results that's meaningful, and so on. And that, I think, has been one of the things that's pushed into many teams over the past year, trying to find marketers or even just general commercial people, even IT people. I think it's just really hard to find people just generally at the moment. It's a real war out there trying to get new people involved in any team in the organization. But super interesting. Let's go to this side of tech stacks, because this is something that we've spoken about before as well. And we spoke about this back in November on a webinar. And if you haven't seen the webinar, by the way, you should go check it out. It's on the MarMind YouTube page. But tell me a little bit about, especially for these marketing ops guys that are coming in and trying to build out a tech stack, what are some of the tips that you would give them, Scott, to get started, right? Let's go an organization that's got a bit of a disjointed stack at the moment. Everybody's using a couple of different tools. They're a large multinational organization. They may even be using 2 different CRMs, which I've seen before. You might have one team using a specific marketing tool for email, another team using a different email tool. What do I do as a marketing ops person when I come in? How do I get the world in order?
Yeah, wow. Well, I'm glad you're not pulling any punches on the hard questions.
I'm sorry.
So part of it is, it depends. Like the simple answer would be to say, well, you want to converge to, ideally just 1 or 2 like core platforms, and then get everything else, orchestrated around those core platforms, just because you're able to, get greater, velocity, of how you're able to move when like everything's aligned, on one common platform. But I do have to put a little asterisk there and just recognize, like, if you're coming into an organization, a large organization that has multiple conflicting tools, immediately jumping in and just being like, okay, well, we're just going to standardize all this stuff down to 1 or 2 is probably a really long and politically challenging mission. And so I almost feel like if you're starting out from scratch, it's really to look and say like, okay, where is there the maximum opportunity for some early wins in bringing more value to these teams? That might be like integrating across 2 different platforms. Ultimately, maybe one of them wins over the other, but maybe in the short term, the fastest route to unlocking value is simply to have some sort of bridge between them. I think really understanding what the stakeholders in the business feel are the constraints. What do they feel is like limiting, their execution and success, and seeing if you can help solve that, piece by piece, and then, sort of the longer journey of like re-architecting, the tech stack to make it more rationalized. Definitely an important mission, but yeah, don't underestimate the scale of that kind of an undertaking.
That's an amazing answer to a horrible question. I'm sorry.
No worries.
I'm very sorry about that. But it's super interesting, because I think one of those things that will probably play the most against you would be that political landscape, because people implement systems. People have made a decision to put something in place, and for a newbie to come in and say, "Hey, we're coming in and ripping this out," I don't think that's going to go down very well, especially if you need that person to be on side as well. And they probably spent a lot of time, a lot of focus, a lot of money probably on getting that up to speed as well. So I think your tip there around just making sure you're playing the political landscape well is a very good tip, especially in a larger organization, whilst at the same time just listing out all of the different things that people want from a technology perspective, and then trying to get at those needs at the core really across what you implement is a really good advice. Thanks for that, mate.
Sure.
Right. Look, that's really all we have time for today, Scott. But I just want to thank you again for coming on, and it's been a real pleasure speaking with you again. feel free to plug whatever you want. Where can people find you? What's the best place to check you out? Where can people read up on you?
Sure. So yeah, I'm Chiefmartec without the H at the end, at Chiefmartec on Twitter, chiefmartec.com for the blog. And of course, if you're in the market for a great CRM with a wonderful ecosystem, HubSpot.com. And feel free to reach out. Would be delighted to chat with you.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Scott. And thank you for your time today, mate.
All right. Have a great day.
You too.